debate tonight has been very interesting and it's thrown up a number of issues. I think that there are some key issues that need to be addressed here. First of all, we still don't have a definition of who is a lobbyist, and I think that the debate has been naive in terms of focusing on commercial lobbying because, as some of our colleagues on the table have suggested, there's a wide range of people who actually lobby. Bankers, management consultants, lawyers, journalists, actually. And if you start going down the route of a regulatory regime, then you have to have that discussion about who you register as a lobbyist. And we would argue very strongly that you're talking then about creating an elitist regime, because you actually are giving people privileged access to the right of redress to Parliament, which actually is fundamental in terms of the unwritten British Constitution. So I'd throw that up as an issue. Secondly, I know David from Scotland when I was in Scotland from 1995 to 2002, and one of his colleagues came and did work experience for me and never exposed the fact he was going to end up looking at a regulatory regime into lobbying. But I appreciate the fact that no bad stories came out of that, and I also appreciate the fact that with lots of organisations, there's less transparency than there is with the APPC. So that's a debate I think we need to have about where we are in terms of other organisations that lobby very strongly, including Friends of the Earth, who will be sharing a platform with tomorrow morning, and organisations that are NGOs that quite happily accept parliamentary passes, which we ban and bar as members of the APPC. Stephen, I'm really interested in your comments about Salford. I've done some work at Salford. I worked for First Step Trust, which was a charity, and I worked on their business plan as a lobbyist. I worked on their business plan, which was to organise government funding for a recycling and reclamation plan for end-of-life vehicles that focused on training initiatives for people who would basically dispossessed from society, people who had drug abuse problems, alcohol abuse problems, and literacy problems. And we actually sort of worked with that organisation as a charity and got them through the investment fund sort of 3 years ago, announced by Gordon Brown, sort of half of their startup funds. And I understand that actually that organisation is now doing extremely well. My point is that the debate doesn't need to focus on commercial lobbying. It needs to actually focus on the wide variety of lobbying in our society that come from an enormous range of different organisations. And I think what we need to address tonight is the quality of that in terms of how you look at it. And one point that hasn't been raised tonight, and one thing that we actually address, if I may have one more minute, is that we've now been working with the PRCA and the CIPR and other organisations like the Trade Union Congress and the CBI and the National Council of Voluntary Organisations for guiding principles of conduct to say there should be an overarching framework of 4 principles of honesty and transparency and propriety and the rest, whereby individual codes kick in.
I hear what you're saying, that's great, but there's no teeth to back it up.
If you set up a regulatory regime, because you've asked me this question,
yes.
then you go down the States, in the United States, whereby people don't register as lobbyists, they only say they're registering to inform people. Right, so they're not actually registering as lobbyists. And what you do when you have a statutory register is you create an elitist group of people who are allegedly lobbyists. And I know David's shaking his head at that, but actually I really challenge the charitable sector, the trade union sector, and the NGO sector to come clean on this.